Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Is it time for mandatory public service in Canada? Amid the elbows up movement and rising unemployment in youth, what do you think about public service and volunteering? And in our second half, another warm wave of weather is heading for parts of BC, and you may want to hit the outdoors. What are your favorite hikes in our great big beautiful province, and why? I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott. Welcome to a Wednesday version of BC Today. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and on live stream. You can call us now on our top story. What do you think of public service in Canada? Should it be mandatory? What about military service or volunteerism? Do you have experiences with any of those? We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950 across BC. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. Or you can hit pound 690. Be pulled over or hands-free, please, if you're driving. Or email us bctoday@cbc.ca and drop us a comment on our TikTok live at CBC British Columbia. Before we get to our guest and your calls, we have some news on the federal political front centered around BC. Fresh off his victory in the Alberta riding of Battle River Crowfoot, Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre paid a visit to Surrey this morning to outline his priorities upon his return to the House of Commons. He announced a Conservative action plan against crime, referring to what he called a, quote, liberal extortion crisis, unquote. That plan includes calls for bail reform and minimum prison sentences. Poilievre is also urging the federal government to declare the Bishnoi gang be listed as a terrorist organization, joining similar calls from other leaders like Premier David Eby and Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke.
Number one, we're calling on the government to immediately list the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist organization. The Bishnoi gang has been terrorizing communities, shooting up neighborhoods, extorting our people, and taking the money out of our country. There's evidence now that their violence is linked to terror and to political motivations. This is why numerous mayors and premiers, including Mayor Patrick Brown from Brampton, have called for this group to be listed as a terrorist body. Doing so would allow police to arrest anyone who raises money, organizes, plans, does logistics or recruitment, and put those people in jail, or if they are non-Canadians, kick them out of this country. Next, we are calling for jail and not bail by repealing Liberal Law C-75 and Liberal Law C-5, that we will ensure that offenders who engage in extortion go to jail. They are not automatically released again and again through the revolving door.
Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre speaking earlier today in Surrey. Now, after a months-long exile from Parliament following his Election Day loss last spring, Poilievre will make his return in the fall sitting next month. Meanwhile, the federal Green leader will be on the lookout, or party is going to be on the lookout for a new leader. Party leader Elizabeth May has announced she will not lead her party in the next federal election. She's asking party members to say yes to a leadership review. For more than a decade, May has been the face of the Greens, having led the party through 5 elections dating back to 2008. She's the only Green MP sitting in this parliament. On the early edition this morning, she told guest host Chris Walker it's time to get going on a succession plan.
We are not a party where the leader is in control, and it's not a top-down party. So I felt the need as someone who loves this party to make sure I do what's in the best interests of the party. And frankly, I'm very committed to my work as a parliamentarian, but politics is kind of icky, honestly, Chris. So
You don't say.
I want to do what's best for the country. I want to be, as I've always said, I'm Canadian first, and my political affiliations, I'm an earthling, and as an earthling, I think there's no party I belong to except the Green Party, and we need more people elected in the Greens. So my view is we'll do better with the opportunity and the positive building opportunity of a leadership race to find my successor. But I'll work for that successor, whoever he, she, or they are.
Elizabeth May, self-described earthling and leader of the Green Party for now. It is 12:11. You are watching and listening to BC Today. Well, Air Canada flight attendants are set to go back to work as of now after finding a tentative agreement, I should say, with Air Canada. This was our topic yesterday, and many of you emailed to express your views on what happened with the strike and the settlement. Again, they still need to vote on this tentative agreement. Eve, a small business owner, says, in this case, I'm in favor of the strike as they're not striking over a major holiday. Take in contrast, the Christmas Canada Post strike is a small business that relies heavily on e-commerce. It almost killed us and has left a big distaste towards strikes that take place over holidays. I see the Air Canada flight attendants as striking in a way that hits the right balance of making an impact without alienating business customers. Stephen wrote that given workers are going to be required to do unpaid work, this should amplify the argument the back-to-work order is unconstitutional. They're now being ordered to do unpaid work on pain of legal action without even a labor agreement to do so. Deborah says, I was offered a job as a limo driver. The wage was good, but there was a catch. I was to clean the limo on my own time before I went out, and again when I came back, I decided not to take the job and found work elsewhere. Did the flight attendants not know they were only going to be paid when the plane is in motion? We also heard from Margene, who said the flight attendants are not covered by workman's comp during these busy periods. And Dawn said, why did the employees and the union first agree in the first place to no pay for work? And why did they do it for so long? Appreciate all your calls and emails, and we expect to get more of them throughout this afternoon. You are watching and listening to BC Today. When you hear public service, what goes through your mind? Military service, overseas development, volunteering? Well, a new poll from Angus Reid finds at least 7 in 10 respondents support the idea of 1 year of mandatory public service for Canadians under 30. That could be anything from tutoring young kids to working, for example, in a national park. Now, mandatory military service was more divisive. 43% of respondents support it, 44% are opposed. Angus Reid says it did this poll now to gauge people's appetites amid the Elbows Up movement and a renewed sense of Canadian patriotism. We want to hear from you now. What do you think of mandatory public service? What are your experiences with public service and or volunteering? What are the lessons you can learn from them? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950 across our province, 604-669-3733 in Metro Vancouver, pound 690 on your cell phone. Email us bctoday@cbc.ca and leave us a comment on our TikTok Live. We already have calls on the board. We're going to get to them in just a moment. To introduce our guest, though, Subrina Monteith, the Executive Director of Volunteer BC. Subrina, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Just to clarify, what does your organization do?
So Volunteer BC is the voice of volunteerism. So we support all nonprofit organizations across British Columbia and support them in finding the right tools that they need, supporting them with resources, referring them, supporting them with network groups, anything that we can do to support nonprofits to build a healthy volunteer capacity within their organization is what Volunteer BC is here to do.
And what do you make of these Angus Reid survey findings?
So I absolutely, I hear that mandatory volunteerism, it would be a great way to fill the provincial gaps, but volunteerism by definition is freely giving your time and your energy and your spirit. And when it becomes a forced labor, I am concerned about losing that character, that culture of individuals wanting that civic engagement. So even though there is a volunteer shortage and every organization in British Columbia needs volunteers, from board of directors to service delivery volunteers, forcing people to give their time may not be the answer that we want to approach, but I think that there is opportunities to have that, whether it be through the school curriculum programs, right out of college, universities, there are proper times and places for a forced volunteerism experience, but I don't think across the board is a solution.
And perhaps we ought to clarify, we can distinguish between public service and volunteerism, perhaps in the fact that if somebody is required to do public service, be it civilian or military, they may be paid for that. So that's an important distinction, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, when you talk about other opportunities, I mean, often when individuals have court-ordered community service hours, I mean, that's a forced volunteerism experience, but it does not have to be negative. It can be positive, and they can come up with skills that'll take them to the future.
Let's go to the lines now. Jan is joining us from Langford. Jan, do you have experience with public service or volunteerism?
Well, if you mean I served the military, the answer is yes.
Yes.
I got paid for it, too, as a corporal, Army Reserve. And if America gets nasty, I'm prepared to re-enlist with the Home Guard. But seriously, there cannot be a mandatory conscription or any type of compelled service. That's a big mistake. We had conscription in World War I. It was a huge problem, especially with French Canadians, because they just didn't see themselves serving France. They saw themselves being forced by the English to serve the war effort. That was a big mistake. World War II, it was all about volunteers, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know all the history about World War II, but people came out of the woodwork in World War II because it was a just war against fascism. But with regards to community service, I think it needs to be volunteer. It should be oriented with school as part of going to college and university, and so it should be some kind of rewards, maybe getting credits. Your experience is accepted as a credit when you get to college or university, and that way you're rewarded for your volunteer efforts. And if there's a stipend, the stipend is fine. There's nothing wrong with the stipend.
And would it be right after high school? Where do you think this could happen?
Yeah, right after high school for sure, because a lot of people want to take a gap year at any rate. So let's use that and then have some kind of reward system where your experience is going to be accepted at a college, at a post-secondary level of education.
If somebody's choosing to do that.
A lot of employers might say, you know what, fantastic, you got some experience at that. So even employers will look at that as a positive.
Now, not everyone, John and Jan, I appreciate your call. Subrina, I want to put this to you. Not everybody outside of once they leave high school is going to go to university. They may do a trade. They may do another line of work. Do you see something in there to Jan's suggestion around credits for post-secondary or some type of post-secondary experience?
I encourage to call it a run for office. So I think that would be an amazing thing. I think that when an individual can volunteer and try the skill before they buy it with their education and their time, I think that will really create a solid platform. I see so many high school, university students that end up going to get maybe 1, 2, 3 degrees before they find where they're going to land. So if you can try it before you buy it, I think that's really going to cut down on student loan debt, all those things that students are experiencing because they flip-flop. They don't know where they're going to go in life. So try it before you buy it with volunteerism.
And part of that is the fact that, university requirements have gone up for a lot of students, and perhaps they don't want to go to university, and among other things. I want to read an email we just received from Christine Barber. Christine says, I have friends living in Europe who have had to do service. In Denmark in particular, they have mandatory service year, military or volunteering, which I think is great. But why it works there is because youth are given an income for the year. If we're going to implement a mandatory service year, what financial situation would be in place to ensure that youth don't suffer and can have this as a positive experience? And as a teacher in BC, I think a service year could really help youth get work and social experience and find greater connections to their community and to their country. We appreciate that email, Christine. Let's go to Trevor in Agassiz. Trevor, what do you think about public service, be it mandatory, volunteering, what?
Yeah, I'd like to see some more motivation for volunteer service, and maybe possibly making it mandatory might help. But when we talk about conscription and stuff like that for the war, the real war is kind of going on at home right now with homelessness. And we really need more outreach in that community as well as our aging population that's coming down the pipeline. We're going to need more people to volunteer and help with our seniors and stuff. So if you think about the guaranteed minimum income and what that provides as an opportunity for volunteering, moving towards a model like that where they've seen that people are more willing to volunteer might be the better approach to this rather than making something mandatory. As well as we should be outreaching to the high schools more often and more frequently with volunteer opportunities for stuff like this. Definitely when it comes to outreach work and developing those relationships with people on the street that we know are beneficial in providing resources and getting those people back on their feet. That's really, really desperately needed in our communities.
Trevor, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much for that. Subrina, I saw you nodding along there. What do you make of what Trevor said?
I want listeners to think about what a day without volunteers would look like in your community. There would be no food banks. There'd be no food hampers handed out. There'd be no lunch programs for the vulnerable. Seniors wouldn't have the highly anticipated visits, social visits that they've been waiting weeks for. Students wouldn't have somebody to support them with literacy. Nonprofits wouldn't exist because their boards are volunteers. Without volunteers, our society would not function. It truly, a healthy community looks and feels. They have all those social programs that residents and the vulnerable population need and want. So without volunteers, our society would not look like we have it now. And people fear with economic changes and the government changes, all those things, without volunteers, I think people would see it really quickly.
I want to read an email from Mina, who says, under 30s have a hard enough time just finding work and housing. Let's hear from them. Yes, if you are under 30, what do you think of this idea? We'd love to hear from you. 604-669-3733 is our number in Metro Vancouver. 1-800-825-5950 across our province. Pound 690 on your cell phone. Email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. On TikTok, CBC British Columbia. And some of you had already sent us some messages in there. Ray Lee from Montreal. MTL, I'm going to assume. What has this country ever done for its youth? And we expect them to give more. Volunteering is great, but forcing volunteer work is not going to go over well. Jack Smith says, nobody should be in favor of mandatory public service unless they're willing to do it themselves. NRP or NRP Ritz says more free labor when people are already choosing between rent and food. Subrina Monteith, see you nodding along there again. There is this dichotomy, and perhaps we should clarify if somebody was, if it was expected that they would do some version of service. And I talked to a colleague of mine who was in Katimavik, who said they were given a very small stipend, but transportation costs, housing costs, and other things were covered. Is that a way to encourage more people to get into volunteering in public service?
I think there are lots of opportunities for the provincial government, federal government, as well as local government to be able to support building a healthy volunteer capacity. When you see a municipality invest in their local nonprofits to make sure that they have everything they need to be able to provide the social programs that residents rely on, those are healthy communities. And in order to do that, I mean, they're the little things like, free transit for volunteers, maybe a special pass for volunteers that are given out to nonprofit organizations. Provincial government could look at some sort of subsidy program or tax cuts or some sort of tax credits. I mean, they give tax credits to volunteer fire department members. So there are opportunities that are out there. I think that just the government needs to invest in volunteerism. And I want to put a plug. In 2026, the UN declared it the International Year of the Volunteer. We need to get ready for that. If we're going to be a part of a UN sustainability goal, we want to make sure that British Columbia is ready. I sit on the National Volunteer Strategy that Volunteer Canada is currently creating, and it's really impactful. BC needs something similar. Volunteer BC has been working on it at a very small level. We want to build it up. We want to make sure that everybody's involved in creating that provincial strategy to build volunteer capacity.
We know that your colleagues at Volunteer Canada are perhaps feeling the pinch when they've said volunteering has declined, impacted by factors like the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, labor shortages. And StatsCan data from June noted Canadians over 15 years old who volunteer for charities and nonprofits dropped from 41% to 32% between 2018 and 2023. Have you noticed that, Subrina?
nonprofits are needing to recruit more and more volunteers. And where are those volunteers coming from? People have had to go back to work to make ends meet. So volunteers are really critical. And I think we're going to get to a pinch point where people are needing to decide if they need to go back to work versus volunteer. And we're losing volunteers to going back to work to be able to provide for themselves. So I don't know what the solutions are. I just know that we are at a position that if things don't change pretty quick and organizations are not funded to be able to have a proper volunteer program, including volunteer managers that can look after those volunteers to make sure that they're meeting all the health and safety and screening to make sure they have volunteers that are, protecting the vulnerable sector that maybe that nonprofit works with. If we don't have organizations in our province that are taken care of properly and managed properly, I'm fearful. I'm fearful for the future of volunteerism.
Just before we go to another break, I want to read an email from Scott. And if you are on the line, I know we have calls stacked up. Pardon me, we're going to extend this, actually. My apologies. Let's go to Douglas then in Dragon Lake. Douglas, thanks for waiting on the line. What do you think about volunteering and a version of public service, be it mandatory or voluntary?
Yeah, I'm not. Thank you for taking my call. I'm not supportive of a mandatory situation, but I think if we make the incentives strong enough, that's going to take care of itself. I just want to go back. I participated with an amazing group of people in the first year of Katimavik.
Whoa.
And so
May I ask what year what that was?
In 2027, we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary, and we're all going to get together again, all of those that still remain.
Wow.
And we've met quite a few times over the years, so I really want to make a plug for a rejuvenated program similar to that. And, initially it was funded through the Department of Defense, the Ministry of Defense, because a component of it was for partial military service. But the majority of the people that went through that program that did incredible community service all across this country and, developed new languages and all kinds of things, I think is a phenomenal program that we really need to reconnect with. I was hoping during sunny days of Justin Trudeau's era, when he did talk about rejuvenating a program like it, that would have happened. But I think now, with this crazy attempt to put billions or trillions into new military hardware spending that just feeds, the warmongers, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity of shifting that money to true backing up the youth for our future and for initiating a phenomenal program of community service right across the country.
And Douglas, if I can ask quickly, what sort of things did you do with Katimavik? Some on-the-ground examples.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things is we spent the winter up in the Yukon, Dawson City, Yukon, and we helped chip away at the permafrost for foundations of the big hall, the Diamond Tooth Gertie's Hall in Dawson City, Yukon. We did all kinds. We set up recycling programs in northern New Brunswick, in L'acadie, in Caraquet, where we initiated at that time, 1977, 78. Recycling was just in its very initial stages in the country. So these are just a couple of the many different things that our group, our alone of 36 people, 36 youth, pursued in the different rotations and places that we spent 3 months each in across the country.
Douglas and Dragon Lake, we really appreciate your call and giving us some on-the-ground examples of the kind of service you did through Katimavik. Thank you very much. We're just about heading to a news break. If you're on the line, Peter in White Rock, please stay there, as well as Anthony. We'll get to you in a moment and be back with our guest, Subrina Monteith, after this news break with Tarnjeet Parmar.
Good afternoon. Air Canada is adopting a policy to cover some transportation expenses incurred by customers during the strike by flight attendants. It will reimburse customers for costs if they had a cancelled flight from August 15th to August 23rd, if Air Canada was unable to rebook them and then they had to make other arrangements themselves. The announcement comes as passengers are still scrambling to get to their destinations, a day after the two sides reached a tentative deal. Several evacuation orders orders and alerts have been lifted on Vancouver Island after rain helped ease conditions for crews fighting the Mount Underwood wildfire near Port Alberni. It is still considered out of control, but the BC Wildfire Service says it's not expected to grow anymore. An evacuation alert remains in place for the China Creek campground and for Headquarters Bay. And BC's police watchdog is investigating after a man was shot and killed in a confrontation with officers in Vancouver. The Independent Investigations Office says it happened yesterday afternoon near the Joyce Collingwood area. There was reportedly a dispute between two people, and one man allegedly had a weapon when police arrived. Vancouver police say those two people involved were neighbors. Those are your news headlines. For more information, you can go to the website anytime, cbc.ca/BC.
Taranjeet Parmar in our CBC newsroom. Thank you very much. We're talking about public service, be it mandatory civilian service or military service or a version therein, and volunteering. We want to hear from you. Let us know. We have a lot of calls stacked up, and we're with Volunteer BC's Executive Director, Subrina Monteith. Let's go to Peter in White Rock. Thanks for waiting, Peter. What do you think?
Well, I think public service is a heck of a good idea, but it has to be voluntary. It's such a violation of individual rights to force people to do that. And we're a fairly wealthy country. We can afford to pay our volunteers decent salary, maybe offer rewards in terms of tuition when they go back to school or whatever. I wanted to mention that I've done a fair amount of volunteer work, especially for groups like Oxfam. And in terms of mandatory service, I found myself 40, 50 years ago in the U.S. Marine Corps and had to escape because I didn't want to kill Vietnamese people. So I have a problem with that kind of mandatory service. But there's so many things that we need to do in this country, and we have the resources. We can do it. But again, it needs to be voluntary. So offer people, rewards for their service, and then it's win-win for everybody, rather than forcing people to do things they may not want to do. And it would especially probably impact lower-income people who didn't have as many options.
Peter, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. It's a good perspective. Sabrina, again, I saw you nodding along there. What do you make of what Peter said?
I think Peter's absolutely right. I think that making it mandatory just takes away the core part of volunteering. It's giving of your time and your energy and your support. I think that it's an important part of our society that we keep it free of will, and people who volunteer are just good people. They want to give their time. They're not opening up their checkbook. They're giving their time. That's one of the most valuable things we have in our lives is our time and where we spend our energy. So choosing to get behind an organization because you believe in their mission and what they're doing for your community or your province, I think that's a really big part of what makes us very unique and humans. So I think it should be not mandatory.
Scott in Burnaby writes us, I think Canada ought to create a military-funded wildfire service. Anyone under 25, whether high school students or recent graduates, could volunteer and be guaranteed a paid spot. It would focus on humanitarian work, not combat, and especially support First Nations communities who face the brunt of wildfires. This would give youth a meaningful way to serve the country, build skills, and strengthen Canada's resilience to natural disasters. Scott, that's an interesting idea. And particularly, Subrina Monteith, in the face of climate change and rising youth unemployment, a unique idea there.
Absolutely. So I wear a couple hats. So one of the other jobs I have is I work at a regional volunteer center as well, and that supports the Okanagan-Similkameen. So working with lots of floods and fires. So I've worked and placed volunteers during emergent situations. I've helped find volunteers to help go sandbag at somebody's home, help to pack somebody up who's on evacuation alert, and they turned out to be evacuation order, and that person wouldn't have been able to pack on their own. But finding volunteers before it's critical. So the challenge we have with the emergence program is that provincially, to volunteer with the ESS program, which is a highly valuable program, and it helps those who are in those evacuation situations. They need training, and it's a commitment to be a part of that team. And there's lots of expectations of training and being on basically on call, right? When something happens, nobody can plan for a wildfire; it just happens. So emergent volunteers are a little bit different because when an emergency happens, they haven't had that training. So to be able to place people and support those who are in need with emergency situations in their province property and their home and get them to a safe location, whether it be, supporting or referring to different programs. We got Alert. Alert's an amazing program in the province where they help move people's pets, right? Livestock.
Yeah.
Livestock. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that we have both. We have organized programs, but when an emergency happens, having those emergent volunteers, people who want to support a situation, whether it be donations of clothing or their time, I think that there's a place for volunteers.
And particularly when it comes to livestock and animals, we know you're joining us from the Okanagan. We know the interior, the peace, and we see that across years when we've had devastating wildfires throughout BC, and the people that step up to move and house and give space to animals and livestock who are members of people's families for sure. Let's go to Anthony in Coquitlam. Thanks for waiting, Anthony. What do you think?
Okay, I think they should be volunteers. My story is I had mandatory military conscription in Italy in 1980. In 81, I failed to show up and I got arrested. And the bottom line there is, since you're in healthcare, you get posted to a military hospital. You do learn some skills there. My cousin, the accountant, got posted to a warehouse situation, keeping track of all the military munitions, everything from bullets and shells, uniforms and shoes, and toilet paper. The thing was for me, coming back to Canada, I would like to see more volunteerism, but the world is becoming hostile, and sooner or later we're going to have to develop a very strong military. I do have this. My other cousin in Arizona, he volunteered for the U.S. Navy back in 85. And the bottom line there was he got posted to the Persian Gulf during Desert Storm 1, and he was a computer operator, basically killing people with Tomahawk missiles. He was told to program these coordinates into the computer and fire. So, there's some morality involved there, but I do think military service is a good thing if we're in peacetime. The problem is when it gets hot, people die. But I think Canada sooner or later is going to have to figure this out. Young people are going to have to figure this out. And I think we need a strong Canada. And to me, I would love to see who volunteers, number one. And if it becomes mandatory, who's going to show up to fight?
Appreciate your call. Thank you very much, Anthony. A very interesting perspective there. And you mentioned all this when the Canadian Armed Forces are trying desperately to recruit more people. The Prime Minister has announced a lot of new funding and pay increases, billions and billions of dollars going into national defense across the second largest landmass on Earth. There are some big challenges there. And in fact, there may be, one could argue, the time for people, if there are increases in pay and opportunities, that they may want to join the military now. Anthony, thanks very much. Don is in North Vancouver. Don, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's probably necessary to have some kind of a mandatory service. I mean, how many kids would show up to school in high school if it weren't mandatory, really? But we need to kind of go beyond that. I mean, what does Switzerland do? Everybody has some time. They go out on weekends, I'm not sure, and learn some skills that would be defensive skills in necessary times, and otherwise just useful skills. I mean, we also need, China does that. I mean, many countries in the world have some kind of service situation, and it could solve part of the homeless problem. I mean, they don't mind living in tents, obviously, so we could have some fancy tents in the summer, which would give them some purpose and a place to be. And with training people, some of the trainers might be from military, some of the trainers might be teaching people how to have peace marches and protest wars. That's as defensive as a situation as sometimes we need, but sometimes we need that too. And other people would be learning, like reservists, which are totally volunteer now, but could be enhanced somehow. And we need something in school, too. I mean, we need, more than anything in school, we need a life skills course where you could learn how to make a campfire, learn how to put out a campfire, learn how to maybe help out if there's a neighborhood fire or a forest fire, maybe learn how to do some banking, learn how to read a will or make a will. We need some of these kinds of skills. We're not getting taught in school. We're getting taught some mathematics that mostly we forget by the time we're in our late 20s, you know?
Yeah.
We're
Don,
not
appreciate the
learning
call.
stuff that we need for life.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. I probably worth noting for those who may be experiencing homelessness and living in tents, that may not be a service may not be for them if they're living with a mental illness, if they're living with severe addiction, if they're living with other physical challenges. But I take your point, Don. Let's go to Josh in Salmon Arm. Josh, what do you think?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm in favor of a conscription type mandate for our political system in Canada, be it municipal, provincial, or federal politics. And here's why. First off, we're not putting anyone in harm's way like we would be with the military. And there seems to be an increasing polarization across our political spectrum. Our neighbors to the south are having, a heck of a time down there. And I think having a conscription style mandate would kind of demystify the whole process. It would engage young people, and it would take the people on the fringes and kind of bring them closer to the center where we have more of a mutual understanding. I work for a Crown corporation, and it's really not that interesting or exciting for the most part. Most things are really bureaucratic. They take a long time. They're slow to move. And just getting people engaged in the process, I think, would really help kind of move things along in our country. Your guest was also saying that, you could, incentivize that with, tax cuts or, housing situations and stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways that we can sweeten the pot for this sort of engagement, but I think it would be a net positive.
And Josh, just to clarify, when you say some version of mandatory service, would that be like a civilian corps, not just military?
Well, like I'm saying, we require people to have jury duty, right? That's sort of a mandated facet of our society that people have some caveats to get out of it, and yeah, it doesn't have to be like a military style version of getting into being involved in our politics. But I think having some sort of requirement where you have to put in one term in municipal, provincial, or federal politics in when you're 18 to say 65 or whatever the framework is for that. I think it would just give a lot of people perspective that I think is kind of desperately needed.
Josh, appreciate your call. Josh and Salmon Arm, thank you very much. We're going to be wrapping up the segment in just a moment. Before I get back to you, Subrina, I want to read a couple of comments from TikTok. Just Jex Healing says, make a call for volunteers and make it desirable. Don't force people who are suffering and afraid. Fix community morale and you'll gain volunteers. We have Dr. Serafima Voynich. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Doctor. I wish we had more free community building initiatives. What lets you get to know people. Morgan says, yes, learned volunteering in high school, then continued afterwards. And Alex, the volunteer, says, when we give unconditionally, we receive. This is something we have forgotten. To wrap this up, Subrina Monteith, interesting perspectives here. One of the things I'm still coming back to is it sounds like people, and perhaps more young people, are willing to volunteer, but they're feeling that pinch of simply being able to afford daily life. So beyond what we've suggested, what else would you suggest to the powers that be to fix that?
That's a really big question. So, I mean, there's lots of things that every level of government that can do. It's all about whether they choose to invest in this part of their budget and put part of their budget towards volunteerism. So it's one of those things. I think that, like I said before, if we don't have volunteers, we will know it. We'll feel it real quick in our society, in our communities. So ensuring that we have everything that we need at a nonprofit level to be able to have a healthy volunteer programs within each organization is going to be really key. One of the things Volunteer BC is doing is on October 2nd in Richmond, we're hosting a conference. It's a one-day workshop. It's called Volunteer Futures. If you are part of a nonprofit organization and you want to learn how to build a healthy, strong volunteer capacity, be there. That's a really great way to network and talk to other organizations, get everybody in the same room. We talk about opportunities to do things together. Maybe some advocacy work will come out of that. I think that when we put our heads together, I think there'll be other options, other solutions. When it comes to youth, I think they look for really meaningful ways to engage in organizations that are creating micro volunteer opportunities, maybe online opportunities, or honoring individual schedules and letting them pick. Maybe you get two people who are sharing, a 5-day-a-week rotation, but maybe they're only working 2 out of the 3. All of those sort of things. There's lots of ways that we can build volunteer capacity in our province if we're creative. Volunteer BC has lots of ideas to share. We have, different webinar sessions that we offer as well to be able to share, network, and connect with others. I mean, there's lots of ways. It's just investing effort into building volunteer capacity. That's my big takeaway today that I want to share is that if we work together, we'll get there. But if we don't, we're going to stay.
Subrina Monteith, Executive Director of Volunteer BC. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our CBC News app, online, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Lots more on the day's top stories on the afternoon shows where you are. In Metro Vancouver, here's what's coming up on the Coast.
Hello there, Dan. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I wanted to flag a few of the things we've got lined up for On the Coast later this afternoon. We're going to talk about the world of competitive ballet dancing with all of the pressures therein. We'll meet a researcher from the University of the Fraser Valley and talk all about how that world can be a really unhealthy environment for many, and that can lead to some damaging behavior. So that conversation is coming your way. And we'll also hear from an organization that helps kids get into sports when money is a barrier. But right now, the demand has grown so much that they simply can't keep up. So we're going to hear more about how kids sport is hoping the community can step in and help. Just some of what's coming your way this afternoon between 3 and 6 on the Coast.
Gloria Makarenko, thank you very much. You can hear On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver and anywhere on the CBC News app. Again, we got lots of emails and we appreciate all the calls on the volunteering and public service discussion. I'm going to be reading some of those tomorrow. We are rounding the corner to the end of August. Summer vacations starting to wind down for a lot of people. But a quick look in the forecast shows a lot of blue sky and temperatures in the low to mid 30s across parts of our province. All the ingredients that send people to their favorite hikes and outdoor activities across BC. We'd love to hear from you. What is your favorite hike? And do you have any exciting hikes planned until the end of the summer season? Any tips if you're going out? Maybe some places that aren't as popular, and if you're willing to share your secrets. Call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Email us bctoday@cbc.ca and leave us a comment on the TikTok Live. Joining us for this discussion is Stephen Hui. He's the author of 105 Hikes. Oh, that's it. In and around Southwestern British Columbia. The book is now in its second edition. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen.
Hi, Dan. Great to be here.
So out of 105, can you narrow it down to maybe top 3?
Well, one of my all-time favorite hikes is the Sunshine Coast Trail, and I did that as a 10-day backpack, but you can divide that up into day hikes between the various huts. So that's up in the Clothat region near Powell River. That's fantastic. There's also the Skyline Trail in Manning Park, Also a backpacking trip that you can divide into day hikes with, beautiful wildflowers, summit views, Cascade Mountain scenery. And then another one is the East Beach Trail on Haida Gwaii. That's a incredibly kind of remote backpacking trail, but you can day hike both ends. It's on Graham Island in Haida Gwaii. Just incredible scenery.
Now, for people who perhaps are a little, I won't say less ambitious, but would like to start with something like a day hike wherever they are, what do you suggest?
Yeah, I suggest, looking at your local, provincial, and regional parks, picking up a guidebook and doing a flatter trail. Say here in Vancouver, you have, Lynn Headwaters Regional Park or Capilano Canyon, and doing one of those trails, more on, kind of valley bottom trails. Get used to the roughness of the terrain. Don't go alone, go with somebody else. And just be less ambitious on the beginning.
I haven't had a chance, I'm only saying this because we're showing some footage for our viewers of the Grouse Grind. Is that on your list? Forgive me, I haven't seen the latest version of your book.
It's in there as an approach to longer hikes. So it's actually kind of the appetizer for doing the Crown Mountain and Goat Mountain hikes. But
fair.
Honestly, it's not a great experience if you're looking for a hike. It's more of a fitness thing.
Yeah, it's an endurance test.
Yeah, it's not that enjoyable. If you want to, you can pay and skip it on the gondola.
That's true, because you still have to pay on the way down. But the trick I found is if you go up and do it and you're trying to make a time, that's great. Stop, have something to eat, maybe replenish your electrolytes with a Caesar at the top, and then take the gondola down. I also see on the list Mount Boucherie Trail. I did that last summer, and it was fabulous. Very hot that day, and there was a bit of bouldering, but there was a lot of variety. And I mean, you cannot beat the view from the top of Mount Boucherie overlooking West Kelowna, everything.
Yeah, that's just a wonderful trail. It's short. You can kind of go up the rough backside or kind of the more sturdy trail up the other side. But it's great because it's transit accessible. There's a transit loop pretty close there. It's just a wonderful trail. Even if you're just on a little weekend trip to Kelowna, you can fit that in. I love that one.
Now, do you prefer front country or back country hiking?
Well, I mean, backcountry hiking generally, but it all starts in the front country, and there's plenty of shorter, easier front country hikes that I do, especially in kind of the fall and spring when things are snowier up higher. So, yeah, I do everything from nature walking to backpacking trips.
So we know that this has been, if we can call it an issue, popular provincial park. Joffre Lakes Park will be closed for recreational visitors from September 2nd to October 3rd for Indigenous communities to conduct cultural practices. This has been going on for at least a few years now. What do you make of that closure?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's long overdue. I mean, this is it's right in the middle of Lillooet territory. It's sacred land. You can't really be practicing ceremony and culture with a bunch of Instagrammers and yoga posers gawking at you. So
Good
I
point.
think it's important. It's good for the wildlife too. I think we need to learn to share the parks and recognize that the way we've managed parks has been exclusive to some people and has excluded the First Nations who have responsibilities for the area.
Let's go to Colleen in Burnaby. Colleen, do you have a favorite hike or a trail you like to go on?
Yes, I do. My favorite one is Deer Lake. Deer Lake in Burnaby, and it can be a very short and easy one, or it can be a really good workout. My workout I do is when you go halfway around the lake, there's 312 stairs, and during that gives you all the First Nations little codes all up the stairs, telling you about the First Nations myths going through there, and the inclines are quite high, so I can do 2 hours hike there and also / walk and getting a good workout without having to go to the North Shore or having to go up to to any Pemberton or whatever. It's nice to do things, lots of hiking and trails locally, like even Deer Lake, Burnaby Lake, that's 10 kilometers going all around, and there's the Brunette River Walk, which is absolutely beautiful. That's another. I mean, there's just so many locally here that we can do and still get your fresh air, being in nature, without having to go to the top of a mountain, which I've done many.
Oh, nice. Quickly, Colleen, what's your favorite mountain hike?
My favorite mountain hike was Golden Ears up to Mike Lake.
Oh,
through,
lovely.
The UBC Resource Forest and up to Mike Lake. And that's would have been my favorite in a mountain. But you can still get hikes locally and still get a good workout without having to go to a mountain. I'm just thinking of people, I'm in my 70s now. So, you know, you can still be fit and be in nature without having to go to the North Shore or out to Maple Ridge or somewhere to hike a mountain.
Good point, Colleen. Thank you very much. Please keep hiking. Okay. That is awesome. I saw you nodding along there, Stephen Hui. If more people are getting out on the trails, there is some etiquette. There are perhaps some good practices to follow. Remind us what those are.
Yeah, it's important not to be blasting your music everywhere. You know,
yes.
They want to hear the bird song. They want to hear the waves, creeks. You know, it's important to not, with your group, to hog the whole trail. So walking single file, knowing a bit of etiquette, like the people who are, coming downhill, step aside for the people going uphill, stepping aside for horses, just not being super loud and allowing people to get that, kind of nature feel, that break from the city while you're out there together.
That is great advice. And Aaron emails us to say Sanjo Bay on North Vancouver Island. Are you familiar with that one, Stephen?
Yeah, that's up at Cape Scott Provincial Park. That's a lovely area. Yeah. I did the North Coast Trail up there. It's a beautiful backpack. That place is amazing, yes.
All right, good advice. A bit far flung, similar to, you mentioned hikes on Haida Gwaii, but you know what? Good things to, could be, if we can call it, bucket list goals there. Stephen Hui, an avid hiker and the author of 105 hikes in and around Southwestern British Columbia. Thanks so much for your time and your expertise.
Thanks, Dan. Happy hiking.
Cheers. And that is it for our show today. Thank you for calling in and joining the discussion. You can always email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, and we will get to more of your emails tomorrow around public service, military service, and volunteerism. Really appreciate all of your feedback.